McCarthy Insurance Group, serving the community for over 70 years. For home, farm, motor, life, health and business insurance, log on to mig.ie or free phone 1800 50 11 11. Probably your best call in 2024. Charles McCarthy Insurance is trading as McCarthy Insurance Group, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Real people, real opinions, Real Talk Radio. The multi-award winning Niall Boylan Show.
Classic hits.
But last night we started a conversation about cannabis. We had a mixed reaction. And a group, this is all because, of course, a group of doctors yesterday published a letter in the Irish Times warning of the dangers of cannabis. And according to these doctors, around 22,000 people are addicted to the drug. And it's a bigger issue for younger people than alcohol, according to them. They say it's the most common substance generating demand for addiction services and bigger than alcohol, and that we should not legalise it. A Citizens' Assembly will meet this weekend to discuss the pros and cons of legalising drugs like cannabis. But what do you think? Do criminal laws around things like cannabis really work? It is clear that we have lost the war on drugs probably a long time ago. People say prohibition doesn't work. I don't necessarily agree with that. But however, just walk down O'Connell Street any evening and you would imagine it probably has been lost. Should we legalise it, take the money out of the black market and put it into our own addiction services? What do you think? Or is that really going down the wrong route, giving the green light to another drug in society? We already have alcohol, we already have cigarettes, we already have many different things which are essentially drugs in society. Should we legalise another one? Let me know what you think. The number is 087 188 0008. One man who is advocating for the legalisation of drugs for personal and recreational purposes is Gino Kenny, TD from People Before Profit, and he joins you on the line. Gino, good evening to you.
Hi, Niall. How are you doing?
Gino, firstly, let's get back to this letter that was published in the Irish Times from a group of doctors. And according to those doctors, and I listened yesterday to 61 News, or maybe it was RT Radio, you know, they're saying that 22,000 people are addicted to the drug here, and it's a bigger issue than alcohol. Do you think that's a fair comment?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's concerning that, you know, people are presenting with dependency issues around cannabis, and there's no getting away from that. I'm not disputing that. What I'm here to debate, and I done it yesterday in relation to some of the doctors that put their names to it, is the system that we have at the moment. Because the system at the moment is prohibition, where kind of, you know, cannabis use, supply or consuming is illegal. It's unregulated. I would argue that we need a regulated system so people will know exactly what they're consuming. That system is a better system than we have at the moment because largely the black market control cannabis supply, and when somebody wants to consume cannabis, and most people won't, but if somebody wants to consume cannabis, they actually don't know what's actually in the cannabis that they're using. So I would argue that if it was regulated, first of all, you'd have regulatory control, you'd have largely control of the supply, and the revenue that would be generated from it would go largely to, you know, rather more progressive things in society rather than the black market. So
you want to take it? You want to take it away from the dodgy fella down the lane, essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It would be from the black market. No.
Okay. Let's look at that. Okay. So let's say we take it away from the dodgy fella down the lane, and let's be clear about it. You know, the gangland people will find something else to sell. If it's not cannabis at a cheaper price, it'll be something else, cocaine or whatever it happens to be. But we look at statistics around the world in relation to cannabis. And by the way, I smoked cannabis between the age of 18 and 21. I think everybody has been exposed to it at some point in their life. When I got to about 2021, I went, that's enough for me. It makes me feel dopey. I couldn't focus and everything else. So I didn't bother again with it.
Okay.
But I think probably it would be fair to say, Gino, you probably have tried it once or twice yourself.
I have, yeah, of course. Yeah.
And it would be fair to say that most people probably have, or if they haven't, they've certainly been offered it. Anyway, but the thing about it is, when we look at stats around the world in relation to cannabis smoking, you know, it's quite clear it's not good for you. Now, I know there is evidence in relation to pain relief, and I think we're all in favour of that for medicinal purposes. There's lots of evidence around that, and some people find with anxiety it can help them, etc., etc. And I'm not disputing all of that. But when we look at, say, evidence from the United States, where we're talking about dropouts from college There was a Christchurch, by the way, in New Zealand health development study showed that adolescents' weekly use of cannabis were 100 times more likely to use illicit drugs. Dropout from colleges were 46% higher for those who smoke cannabis. We can't deny that it has an effect on society. So why would we want to legalize? Now, I know the argument is we're doing it anyway. The kids are doing it anyway. But why would you want to give it a green light and give a green light to something which is not really good for society in general?
I mean, cannabis is probably the most used illicit drug, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
And its availability over the last number of decades and the proliferation of drugs, particularly cannabis, is widely available. Now, the majority of people will never use cannabis, and the majority of people that use cannabis won't have dependency issues or problematic use. But there is some people that will have problematic use with cannabis, like any kind of substance or drug. So making it legal, I think, is better. It's regulated. With other jurisdictions where they have regulated. Now, so obviously, it's not perfect by any means, absolutely. But that system of regulation and taking it away from the shadowy kind of gangs is a better system.
I know people use Amsterdam as a kind of benchmark for this. But in saying that, the people of Amsterdam are not happy with the idea that it has become a tourist capital, essentially, for people who want to smoke cannabis. Yeah, I understand that.
I completely understand that, where, there's issues around where, certain things can happen, right?
Yeah.
And I can understand, people living in Amsterdam where it's kind of, people just go for that particular reason. Now, I understand that's probably not the right model to do, but there's other jurisdictions around the world where it has largely worked. Certain parts of the United States, some of the states there, in Uruguay, in Thailand, they've recently legalized cannabis. And in Germany, now they're looking at a model this year of not fully legalization, but actually have certain kind of not-for-profit system. So there would be cannabis social clubs, and then somebody, could have up to a certain amount of cannabis in their possession and can grow 3 to 5 plants, I think, in their kind of particular house. So cannabis is, anybody can grow cannabis.
I know that, yeah.
You know yourself.
With the right lighting and everything else, yeah.
Yeah, the right light and so forth. So it's probably different from a lot of other kind of illicit substances.
I'm looking, when you mentioned the United States, for example, and there was a piece here, it was an article written in Colorado, and it said the long-term health effects are not fully understood. Similar to tobacco, and the negative health consequences of cannabis might not be realised for decades. And it goes on to say, in Colorado, for every cannabis tax dollar that is raised, in other words, because they obviously tax it, because it's legalised, citizens spend $4.50 to offset the negative effects of legislation. Now, I'm assuming they don't just mean the health effects. I'm assuming they mean the societal effects, because we already see with alcohol, for example, in Ireland, the societal effects of alcohol. That we have domestic violence, we have crime, we have, fights or bad conduct on the streets or whatever it is. Now, I'm not suggesting that everybody smoking a joint is going to go and box the head off each other, because probably not.
The opposite. In some ways, the opposite.
Absolutely, right. But still, when you look at, for every dollar spent, they're saying it costs $4.50 to offset the negative effects. Now, I don't know how they quantify that or calculate.
I don't know how they would do that as well. And obviously, where states have legalized cannabis, it's a regulated system, and there's obviously revenue generated from it. So then, largely, the black market, will recede generally. But it's about
how do you see it sold? How would you see it sold? Do you see coffee shops or
coffee shops or dispensaries? Dispensaries where somebody can go in, and there's a lot of varieties of cannabis that people can consume, and you don't have to consume by smoking. There's other methods through oils and edibles and so forth. So it's and the main thing, Niall, is people will know what they're consuming. So, CBD and THC, which is a psychoactive part of cannabis, they will know exactly, what is in that product. At the moment, nobody knows what's actually they're consuming. So if you banned alcohol tomorrow, what would happen is the black market, criminal gangs would largely kind of would take control largely of alcohol kind of distribution and supply, And then, you would see issues where people would be kind of poisoned by kind of, levels of alcohol, which they actually don't even know what they're consuming. So for that alone, we actually, somebody that is going to consume cannabis, they know what they're taking and so forth. But also, to me, the most compelling argument is all the resources that are spent in relation to criminalising people, bringing people to the criminal justice system.
Do we really bring people? I mean, if somebody,
Not
if
for
you're
small
arrested,
amounts.
no, well, I'm
It's
saying
quite
if you're
arbitrary.
arrested
It's quite
tomorrow by a guard and you only have, a 5 spot, I think that's what they used to call it in my day. I don't know what they call it nowadays. But if you have, 10 quid's worth in your pocket for personal use, is a guard really going to bring you to court? I don't think they
More
do
than
anymore.
likely, no, more than likely they're not, right?
No.
But there are cases, more than likely they're not. But obviously in the past,
You get a
that
caution
was the
probably,
case.
would you?
You get a caution, but it's quite arbitrary. It's quite arbitrary. And
don't get me wrong, I don't want to see some kid 22 have a criminal record for having 10 quid's worth of, marijuana in his pocket.
Yeah.
That's the
No.
last thing you want to see.
No, and it's obviously, as I said, it's quite arbitrary in relation to small amounts. But there still is people going to in front of a judge for small amounts of cannabis. That should be
okay.
kind
Well,
of,
let's look at the bigger picture then. Okay, I don't think cannabis is the worst thing in the world to legalise, right? But
no.
in New Zealand, a Christchurch Health and Development studies show that adolescent weekly users of cannabis were 100 times more likely to use other illicit drugs. Now, if we're going to legalise cannabis, from a people for a profit point of view, maybe put your hat on there for a second. Do you believe we should legalise other drugs too? What about cocaine, heroin?
Well, I think, no, it's a good point, Earl, and
I mean, would you be in favour of decriminalising or legalising? By the way, this word decriminalising to me seems the same as legalising, except we might hand somebody a card saying, "Here's a card with an address for support on it." But I mean, do we decriminalise Class A drugs? Because I think then we're heading down a really rocky road.
I know. I think there's a very compelling argument for decriminalisation of drugs for personal use. So that essentially is different from regulation. So decriminalisation, which in Portugal they introduced, and obviously the results were quite spectacular for the first.
But there's mixed opinions on the results in Portugal, because they talk about the drug crime rate being down, but then the argument for that was that the reason it's down is because the police aren't arresting anybody anymore in relation to personal possession. So of course it's down.
No, it's not perfect, because if you had decriminalisation tomorrow, that would mean that the person is not criminalised for small amounts of drugs, but largely, the black market still exists. So then drugs are still largely illegal, and the black market still exists. It's not perfect by any means. I think
you're never going to get rid of the black market. You're never. These gangs, they'll always find something to sell or something to do.
Possibly. But I think there's a compelling argument for decriminalisation.
There's a black market for cigarettes at the moment, and they're legalised, and there's still a black market.
But no, if you legalise all drugs tomorrow, right? There will be still probably a small black market for certain drugs. I mean, the black market still exists in this country for alcohol, tobacco, prescribed drugs. So the black market will probably still exist, but not to the extent where it is now. I mean, if you legalise cannabis tomorrow, regulate it, and properly done it, properly done it, the black market would basically be gone. I'd largely be gone over a course of maybe a couple of years.
Did you have kids, Gino? Gino, do you have kids yourself? I don't know whether you do or not, but do you have children?
No.
Okay, I have 3 children. They're all in their 20s now. But as they were growing up, my number one thing to them always was, now I'm not a drinker, and that was kind of something we never had in the house, was alcohol either, right? But it was always, drugs are bad, drugs are bad, drugs are bad. And that was always something you pumped into your kids from the day they were born, and you'd see people on the streets. I remember one day with my son, we were walking through town and we seen 2 people on the streets, and one was sticking a needle in the other one. And I told my son, this is what happens when you end up on drugs. You can end up like that. You want to put them off. And I know people say there shouldn't be a stigma, but for your kids, I think it's a good thing to see a stigma, because, that puts them off wanting to do that. But now we're saying that we give it a green light. Is that not the wrong message to send out to young people growing up, that for a lot of them, the reason they didn't go onto drugs was the fear of being caught or the fear of doing something illegal? Whereas now we're saying it's not illegal anymore, so you might as well just have a try of it.
No, well, that's not what decriminalisation would be about.
No, I'm talking about cannabis.
No, but even, I mean, look at it's what we're trying to argue is for safe use rather than more use. I mean, cannabis will be used whether it's legal or not, right?
Yeah, I know.
And I think a better system and other kind of, I suppose, jurisdictions are seeing, where the status quo, criminalising people, bringing the resources that are needed to bring people to, send people to jail and so forth. It largely hasn't worked. Largely hasn't worked. So, a system of regulation is a better system. Does it promote more use? I don't think it does. I think young people and without being ageist, I think a lot of people are aware of drugs in their kind of peer group. A lot of people will never ever touch drugs under any circumstances, but there are people that
I think
use
most them. Will. I think, to be fair, most will be exposed to it at some
probably
point.
experiment.
Yeah,
No,
I remember from sixth year in school, probably nearly everybody I knew. We used to go to the Grove, which is well known in Clontarf, and I think everybody in the Grove at some point was offered a joint or a joint.
Yeah. It's probably part of the growing up process, and most people will probably kind of experiment and not be interested. Some people will like cannabis, and this, in all this debate, some people use drugs and they have a huge amount of pleasure of using drugs, and they don't have problematic use of using drugs, and that's a fact. Now, obviously, there are situations where people have terrible addictions in relation to drugs, and I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen, the terrible, terrible, ugly side of addiction. It can do terrible things to an individual or family. And we're not trivialising that. And, we've all seen over the last 5-6 decades how this has kind of played out. But I think the status quo at the moment, I just don't think it works. I really think, 80% of people in our prisons are there for some kind of drug-related offence. Now, that tells me that the present laws, which are meant to be a deterrent, remember, they're a deterrent of somebody supplying drugs or even consuming drugs, don't work.
Okay.
And and I wish it's not perfect by any means.
Well, I know the Citizens' Assembly are coming together this weekend. There is going to be a debate, and I think the debate in media will go on for the next few months, certainly. Anyway,
I think so.
Gino, just before you go, kind of catch you on the spot. I'm sure you've been watching the day's events. Eamon Ryan, absolutely delighted, of course, that Joe Biden mentioned climate change. That woke him up from his seat very quickly. Joe Biden's visit to Ireland. Was it a great achievement? Was it a wonderful 3 days? Or was it the biggest waste of money while people are lying homeless in the country?
Well, it's still ongoing, so forth. So,
do you support it?
It's not I'm against President Biden come to Ireland. There's huge links between Ireland and America because of historical reasons and contemporary issues and so forth. So, and I've no issue with ordinary American people, decent American people. But what I have an issue is in relation to Americans' foreign policy
and their involvement in war,
and their involvement, in particularly around Palestine. And that's one of the issues that I have. We have a serious issue in relation to the United States' role, particularly in the Middle East, and what they've done in the Middle East. So,
what do you think of the organisation in Phoenix Park where people who were homeless in tents were basically removed, in other words, to make it look good? We didn't want to be ashamed of our homeless, I suppose, in front of Mr. Biden.
Yeah. Well, look, obviously that's it's an ongoing issue. Obviously, people having to, it's a sign of the times, and it's kind of, it's a stain on the present administration in this country that so many people don't even have a home. It's pretty awful. And
Gino, thank you very much indeed. And I
thanks,
appreciate
Noel.
On the
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks very much.
There you go.
Thank
Gino
you. Bye.
All right. Now, I wanted to bring Malachy back on as well. Gino did ask to speak to me on his own, and to be fair to him, that's what I wanted to do, to allow him that. He's not on the air now, so if you are making a comment or you want to make a comment on the air, please keep reference to your own points. And I suppose you can object to what Gino says, but not on a personal level. Malachy Steenson, who spoke to us last night, is back on the air. Malachy, you heard Gino. It was a fairly level conversation. It wasn't robust. Yes, he's clearly in favour of legalising cannabis, and yes, he's clearly in favour of decriminalising other drugs for personal use. He makes some good points. He also makes points I don't agree with. You clearly don't agree with him.
I certainly don't agree with him, and I'm lost as and I know he's gone and we can't actually discuss these things with him, which seems to be typical for politicians now. Just in relation to the Biden visit, I'm lost on what his position is on that, because the people before profit, as I understand it, didn't attend a speech in Leinster House, which was a protest. He's a member of People Before Profit. And, so...
Well, that's why I asked him that question at the end.
Yeah, and he seems to be saying one thing, but not actually saying anything.
Well, maybe, not everybody. I mean, Malachy, you're the very one who might say on a regular basis that you don't have to toe the party line. You know what I mean?
Well, then he should have went into the speech then, shouldn't he?
Well, maybe he wasn't invited. Malachy.
Well, no, hold on. No. All TDs and senators were invited. They publicly said that they wouldn't be attending.
Okay.
So,
well, that was their
we can't have it both ways.
That was their protest to Joe Biden's involvement, America's involvement in war in Palestine. Okay, getting
well,
back.
I mean, Joe Biden. Just before we move on.
Look, I personally, Malachy, I don't even personally want to give it too much airtime because I think it's the biggest waste of money ever. But that's just a personal view of it.
I would just make this point that Biden was vice president for 8 years under Obama. Is one of the biggest warmongers in the world, and I think also his position on abortion, where he has been invited to speak in Knock Basilica, beggars belief.
Okay.
And it shows you where the church hierarchy stands in these things.
Okay, well that's your view on this visit anyway. But getting back to cannabis, just to remind people, because obviously those who might have not been listening late last night, your position is absolutely no way, Jose.
Yes, and I think if you listen to Gino's arguments there, and they weren't really arguments, he was just putting forward his position.
Yep.
Because he was unable to actually answer any of the questions that you put to him. But it's certainly, you see, I mean, the doctors came out yesterday and said 22,000 people, young people, are suffering from mental health.
And I understand what they said, but I don't know where they got that figure from. But go on anyway. It is a large figure.
In the area, I presume they come up with the figure from whatever clients they have. But if we decriminalise even, you will see that number quadruple at the least.
But they say it's a bigger issue than alcohol. I don't understand how cannabis can be a bigger issue than alcohol in a country like Ireland.
You're looking at it as a near 60-year-old.
No, I'm saying that because if you said to me it's a bigger issue than alcohol for 18 to 25-year-olds, I might be with you on that. But not for the whole population.
But I would suggest that from 18 to 40-year-olds, it's a bigger issue, both cannabis and cocaine. And, we have a huge problem with drugs, illegal drugs in this country. And drugs that damage you, whether it's alcohol or cigarettes or any of these other illegal drugs. And we are not going to solve any problems in this country if, we continue to create problems. We should be trying to ensure that young lads and young girls don't go on cannabis, not be encouraging them to go on it, which seems to me to be what happens when the state says something is okay. Because that's what decriminalising means. It means that the people who run the country, who are supposed to know better than the rest of us, who are supposed to do things in our interests rather than their own interests, and we know that they don't do that they do everything in their own interests.
But let me put my impartial hat on for a second and say to you, because obviously I agree with you, but let me just give you my impartial hat and say, if the government legalised heroin tomorrow, I'm not going to run out and take heroin. I have no intention of taking heroin. So what I'm saying to you is, do you really believe by legalising something, it encourages people to, or not encourages people to do it, but all of a sudden more people will actually do it?
Well, let us go back to your analogy yesterday with speeding. If the speed limit on the motorway tomorrow was 140 instead of 120, what speed would you be driving at?
Depends. If I'm on the motorway, probably 130,
on the
140.
Close, yeah. And some people probably go along the motorway at 100.
Well, most people see the speed limit as a target, yes, including myself.
Yeah. Yeah. So, if something is freely available, and I don't mean that in that you don't have to pay for it, but that it's openly available, more than it is now, and it's very openly available, more and more people will use it. And if the state says, you see, the state has to be the arbiter and the determiner of public policy. And, what is better for society? Because it's not about the individuals. I mean, we heard all the people on last night who all talked about themselves. Gino there is not really worried about society. He's only worried about himself and the people he hangs around, whether they can, do what they want. And
that suggests that all politicians are selfish in the way they deal out policies or government policy.
Well, I think if you were to do a poll now on Twitter or on your on your Facebook, and ask people, do they believe politicians act in their own interests or in the interests of
Well,
of,
some are
of
self.
society?
There's
I know
no
the answer
doubt
you
that
would get
some
for
are self-serving. Yet there is no doubt some are self-serving. But generally,
I would actually put
I
that
would
the other
like
way
to
around,
hope,
Niall.
as much as I don't agree with a lot of things that say Sinn Féin would say, or people before profit say, or some other politicians might say. That doesn't mean that they're self-serving. It just means that I don't agree with their policies because their policies would be a lot more liberal than my views.
All that they're concerned about, Niall, is the pursuit of power.
Well,
There
that's
are
what
very
every
few
politician is concerned about, isn't it?
No, every politician is not. There are a very small number of politicians within the Parliament in Ireland and in Britain and indeed in Western Europe who are actually concerned about creating a better society. The rest are into populism. They're into what they think the liberal agenda will deliver, and that will deliver them into power. But
Okay.
that's changed.
Okay, we'll stay there. Let me just go to Mark as well.
Back to the issue, yeah.
Yeah, I want to get back to the issue. Mark, you're on Ireland's Classic Hits Radio. How you doing, Mark?
Good evening, Mark. Good evening. How are you?
You're Mark. I'm Niall. Go ahead. What do you want to say, Mark?
So I want to say this is a bit of a story now, but I was involved in an accident maybe a couple of years ago where I was hit by a car and I lost the function of my whole arm. Now this happened in Vancouver, Canada. They were
sorry to hear that, by the way. That sounds pretty bad.
Yeah, it's for all the injuries I had. This is actually pretty minor, but they prescribed me a lot of like opioids and medicine that like just made me feel like crap, basically, just constant crap. I wasn't even getting better. Like, so the opioids that they gave me to make me feel better actually made me feel much worse.
Yeah, morphine and all sorts of things. Yeah.
Oh, it's disgusting. It's disgusting, and that's it's very popular over that side of the world. But it was suggested I should smoke a bit of cannabis, and I'm here. Honestly, I'm not here to endorse. I'm not here to sell it. For me, it's been very good for me. So I had intense nerve pain.
Absolutely, there's no doubt, Mark, and I'm not going to deny it for a minute because I've seen all the evidence that cannabis can and works very well for pain relief for a lot of people, and not for everybody, but for a lot of people it does. Yes, absolutely.
Sure. So what my question is to Malachi himself, so this is a very minor. It's all relative, but this is minor compared to like people who are dying from Parkinson's or whatever. Like, what do you say to those people? Like, what do you say to those people who smoke a bit of cannabis to get a bit of relief? And what do you say to me who smoke a bit of cannabis? And it's not to smoke cannabis and like be acting the bollocks and like doing whatever.
Getting out of your head. Yeah, you're not a stoner. Okay.
Yeah, it's to give myself a bit of relief, a bit of relaxation, a good night's sleep, whatever it is, So.
Okay.
Okay.
Malachi, it's a fair point. He's been prescribed other drugs in the past, obviously morphine and opium-based products, which are all legalized, by the way, prescription drugs. He decided to go for a non-prescription drug, which is cannabis, THC, and it works well for him. So what do you say to people like him, people with Parkinson's, people with other debilitating, painful diseases possibly, who believe that it works well for them? What do you say to those people, Malachi?
Well, firstly, I wouldn't take any lectures from or any examples from Canada, and particularly from Vancouver.
That's
people,
that's irrelevant. The point, deal with the point he made, and you can't deny that the evidence is there that it works well for pain relief.
This is what we get all the time. You see, the same when we speak about euthanasia or abortion. It's always the hard cases. It's
there's nothing hard about it. He had a painful arm.
Yeah, but you see, what he's talking about should be medicinal cannabis, and that's a whole different argument. But what you will find is, as some of the callers last night were saying, they've taken it for anxiety or depression.
Yeah.
Now, they'd have been better listening to the second half of the programme rather than the part that they were on. But you will have everybody then suffering from anxiety because you can't diagnose it. You just say you're anxious or you have anxiety, and a doctor will probably agree with you. So medicinal cannabis is a totally different argument then. And it's not a black and white argument either. It's the same.
Okay, well then let me ask Mark a question. Mark, if you could get THC in a tablet form, which would have probably the same effect, I would like to think, on the pain in your arm or the numbness in your arm or whatever it is that's causing you the problem, would you be happy enough with that, or is it the pleasure of sitting there having the smoke and the weed?
I'd say right now I would take the tablet.
Okay. Well,
Just,
I'm not going to argue with that, and I would like to think Malky wouldn't argue with medicinal cannabis.
Well, I'm not arguing. That's a different argument.
Yeah.
That's not the argument that we're talking about.
We're talking about cannabis for
somebody's getting-
recreational
we're
purposes, Mark.
We're talking about, by and large, recreational purposes. And you see, people say it's not a gateway and it doesn't lead to this. Anybody I know
It is
who
a
moved
gateway.
on to harder drugs started off.
Okay,
on
the
cannabis,
evidence is quite
right?
clear, and I read it out earlier on to Gino, and this is a major study in New Zealand. The Christchurch Health Development Study showed that adolescents' weekly users of cannabis were 100 times more likely to use other illicit drugs.
Yeah,
So
and that's the reality.
So
And,
Mark,
any of your
okay, well, let me go
listeners-
back to Mark. Mark, that is the reality. We're not talking about medicinal use, and I think there's a way around that. And I think we could have another debate about that. We're talking about recreational personal use here.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you. As a different topic, but what I will ask you is, there are more lads on Saturday nights acting the bollocks on a bit of drink than there are lads.
I'm not going to disagree with you.
So what does Malcolm have to say to that?
Yeah, well, firstly, if you have a fire lighting in your house, you don't go and throw petrol on it, do you?
What does that mean, like?
Well, if you have people out, and we know there are people out drunk every night of the week, as there are people out full of coke every night of the week, and other drugs, and cannabis, you're not going to add fuel to the fire by increasing the numbers who are out of their heads. And it seems to me that there's a deliberate policy right across the Western world to dope up our kids, whether it's through dispensed drugs or illegal drugs.
More, Malachi, honestly, you need to get out of your house.
You need to get out a bit of it.
That's you're having an argument like it's just.
But Mark, you didn't understand the basic analogy he gave you. Nobody's disagreeing with the fact that alcohol is a huge problem in Ireland, and it's not just a huge problem for people who become alcoholics. And have liver problems and all sorts of problems for health reasons. It's a huge problem for society because a lot of the crime, particularly petty crime that's committed all over the country, including, under the Public Order Act, is committed by people who are pissed out of their head. Now, the problem is, alcohol is already legal. There's nothing we can really do with that. You're not going to make it. They're not going to make it illegal tomorrow. We just have to hope that people control themselves. But the point Malachi's making is, that's the fire. So why set another fire upstairs in the house or throw petrol on it by making something else legal that will equally cause as many problems in society?
But it's something like what you said there. Like you said, if it's legal, if it's legal, whatever it is, or decriminalized, it won't bring more customers to weed. Like, it won't get people who don't want to smoke weed will not smoke weed. That's the truth of it. Like,
that's a total misanalysis of society and of human nature. If something is illegal, the majority of people will stay away from it. If it's legal, you increase the amount of people because then it's publicly and socially acceptable. That's the reality.
So if
with any issue,
will you smoke weed, Malachi? Will you smoke?
No,
weed?
I won't. No, because I'm totally opposed to drugs.
Mark, I assume you're a good person and you're not. Well, hang on a second, Mark. I assume you're a good person and you're not a lawbreaker, right? Do you drive Malachi gave a good example earlier on. Do you drive a car?
I do drive a car.
Okay, and you ever drive on a motorway?
I do.
What's the speed limit?
What is the speed limit
on a motorway?
What is it?
You shouldn't, Mark. If you drive a car, you should know
There
these
you
things. Mark, it's 120 kilometres an hour, all right, which is about 80 miles an hour, roughly, right? Now, if they increase the speed...
73 now, is it?
Is it, yeah. Well, it used to be 80 miles an hour years ago, didn't it?
Anyway, you're driving too much in the north.
If they increase that speed limit to 140, do you think more people would drive faster?
But again,
they would. More people would. I can tell you, I would because I'm on a motorway a lot.
But it's in a controlled system, though. It's in a controlled system. Like, you're not. It's on a motorway, so there's a reason why they're allowing you to go up to 140.
No. But you're missing the point. I'm just saying, if they increase the speed limit legally and you were allowed to drive at 140, more people would drive more than 120. So the point is, when you remove a law or you increase a law or change a law, people will adhere to that new law.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so in other words, that's the point Malachi's making. If you legalise cannabis, more people might try it.
But if it's yeah, okay, do you know what? That's very fair. That's very fair. That's a fair point.
Okay, so I hate that when you win an argument. Stay there. Let me just go to John O'D. John, you're in Ireland's Classic Hits Radio. How you doing, John?
I'm not too bad in yourself.
I'm grand, John. Not a bother. You know yourself. So-
Right. First of all, anyway, before I get into it, I 100% agree with Maliki about Biden going to knock.
By the way, did you hear Biden's closing words tonight? I'm just reading. In President Biden's closing address to guests of this evening's official banquet at Dublin Castle, he said the following: "Let's go lick the world. Let's get it done." What does that even mean?
But you there you are. This is what you're doing. I didn't watch any coverage because I have no time for the man because he's an abortionist and Maliki's the same.
Oh, right, okay.
And the priest that invited him to knock to get a humongous kick up in the hole. That man doesn't belong there, but he's satanic and he doesn't belong there.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Back to the drugs. This is why the Gino Kennys of this world, People for Profit, Right, Socialist Party, Solidarity, just hard to remember how many names they have. They change their names more times, they change their underwear. Now, the thing is, if they could hold the balance of power in the morning, right, they would abdicate, they wouldn't take it because all they have is abortion, legalizing drugs, and all this kind of liberal agenda. They have nothing concrete. There's nothing about spina bifida, autism, mental health, physical health.
I think, John, well, hang on. With the greatest respect, that's a little bit unfair. They do talk about those sort of things too. It's just that the ones that you're interested in are the ones you don't like.
They do. They make a bigger song and dance
about
about it.
euthanasia as well.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
but John, well, hang on, both of you. Let me just stick to what we're actually talking about. So, John, okay, in relation to legalizing cannabis, let's focus just on cannabis. Forget about the Class A drugs for the moment.
Yeah.
When you look at the majority of young people, they will be exposed to it. They probably try it at some point. I don't know whether you did or not,
Of course
John.
they will.
Yeah, did you ever try it, John?
No, I didn't because it's illegal, simple as that, and I don't take any illegal substance into my body. Number one, I don't know what's in it, but the most prominent point is because it's illegal. Now, you finally got through to that young lad there, that obviously, like, if you make something legal, and Maliki said it as well, and that chap accepted it, eventually, like, I mean, after being prodded enough, that if something is illegal yesterday and it's legal tomorrow, it's obviously that more people are going that wouldn't have tried cannabis or any other drug that's been made legal, new in the market, will then take it. Now, Chris Luke is a doctor here in Cork. He was on the Mercy Hospital for years, consultant. And you want to hear him speak in local radio and you want to hear him on the Echo, the local paper, right, about the amount of people coming in and they don't know what they have taken, right? And the long-term effects of psychosis. If you get bad psychosis, you're basically shagged for the rest of your life. Like.
No, there's no doubt that the evidence there says that, you know, many people could end up with paranoia, psychosis, depression, and many other things from cannabis, but many don't. They will argue that as well, okay? So, but hang on, but the argument also is, John, when you've got young people primarily, 22, 23 years of age, maybe arrested by An Garda Síochána, it's unlikely they will be brought to court. They'll probably get a caution at worst, but still they could be brought to court for personal use and given a criminal charge and never be allowed, you know, into the United States or could damage the rest of their career.
Well, look, the whole thing is you have to look at the bigger picture, right? And I don't want to see this country damaged any more than it is. And if these Muppets had their way, that's exactly what. You don't see Micheál Martin, who I have no time for. You don't see Baraka, who I have no time for. You don't even see Mary Lou, who also have no time for, promoting this kind of shit, like.
Well, that was promoted. That kind of shit was promoted in the last debate when Leo Varadkar himself was asked did he smoke a little bit of weed, and he kind of wouldn't answer the question, but he kind of said he did.
Yeah, he's got to.
What was the Maliki? If you remember the general election during the debate, wasn't he asked did he smoke weed?
Yeah, like they were all falling. I don't think he specified weed. He said he had done some drugs or something when he was in college, but he didn't do them anymore. Yeah. But the whole political class, John, are wedded to this idea of decriminalisation. That's why they've given it to the Citizens' Assembly to come back with let's decriminalise it, because that's what they will do. Because we know
which is another cop-out. Yeah, another cop-out.
All the other issues that they've addressed.
Okay, well, do me a favor. Go ahead. Well, hang on. Hang on. Let's just Darren come in on this as well, because in relation to being arrested, just finally before I go to the break, Darren, you're in Ireland's Classic Hits Radio. How you doing, Darren?
Even now.
Now, Darren, you went to court. And you were arrested, I assume?
Well, I wasn't arrested.
Charged?
Like, you just literally, charged. Well, I wasn't. I don't have a conviction now.
No. What was the charge?
Possession of cannabis.
Okay, possession of a illegal substance, right? Or a controlled substance. And you went before a judge, I assume?
Yeah.
And what happened?
I had to pay €300 for a solicitor, which in hindsight now was a waste of money. I should have represented myself. and I had to pay €300 to a charity
Oh, boo-hoo.
and take a day off work. And my
Boo-hoo.
name in the local paper.
Oh, lovely.
And-
Serves you right for taking an illegal
You'd
substance.
rather got a
would you
conviction
stop?
then, wouldn't
Oh, here, come here. Sorry, who's that? Is that John, is it?
It is, John, yeah.
Yeah, that's me.
Can I ask John a question, or two questions maybe?
Go ahead.
You sound like you enjoy a pint, am I right?
Yes, because it's legal.
And so if alcohol was made illegal tomorrow, would you give it up?
But that's a ridiculous argument because it won't be.
It's not a ridiculous argument.
No, it won't be. Alcohol is safe to stay, my friend.
Because, well, you're going to be living in a world soon enough where cannabis will be decriminalised, whether you like it or not.
That's the way it is nowadays,
Well,
isn't it?
Well, just look, now, can I just, Malik, refer to it down here again last night. I didn't vote for, when I voted, right, like, I didn't vote for anyone that would end up in a citizens' assembly. I don't know who these people are, I don't know how they picked them, right, they're supposed to be picked at random, that says who. But the thing is, I never voted for anyone. But just like the abortion referendum, as Maliki said, we didn't vote for any of these people, yes, they're farmed out. They're commissioned
But
out to take decisions.
hang on. They represent, the government are here to represent not just you, John, not just Maliki, who would have conservative views, but they're also here to represent Darren, who wants to smoke a bit of weed and thinks it should be legal.
You see, this is what's happening now.
Hang on, I'm going to hear one person at a time. Sorry, Maliki, you wanted to respond.
Why have we got governments that also?
The Citizens' Assembly is set up to give the government cover to bring in legislation that they know the majority of people don't want.
But hang on, I don't have much time. Just deal with Darren's situation. So what a waste of money. He went to court, got a €300 cost him for a solicitor and €300 into the poor box, right? What was a complete waste of money? For what, 25 quid's worth of drugs?
Hold on.
If he didn't smoke in the first place, he wouldn't end up there.
Firstly, he was caught in possession, so he was breaking the law. Maybe he would have been far better off getting a conviction then. The donation to a charity was a way of leaving him without a conviction, which is what happens in most cases.
Well, why would I want to get a conviction at 21 years of age?
Well, then you maybe should have broken the law. You presumably pleaded guilty.
Did you plead guilty,
Well,
Darren?
there's no pleading.
Oh,
The solicitor did evidence
I'm in
for
the
me.
courts every day. Firstly, you said you weren't arrested. You couldn't have been charged if you weren't arrested, right? You were arrested.
There wasn't handcuffs on me. Here. There wasn't. Why would I lie? Why would I come on radio and lie?
Just because you haven't got handcuffs on doesn't mean you weren't arrested. You couldn't have been charged.
Well, I'm just saying I wasn't put in handcuffs.
Right.
Obviously,
You
I
had
was
to plead
arrested and charged if I was in court.
Well, you said earlier you hadn't been arrested when you were asked. Now,
Well, I wasn't in handcuffs.
Darren, you're being pedantic now. If you were charged, you had to have been arrested. They don't have to always put handcuffs on you.
Obviously, but there wasn't handcuffs. There wasn't like the stereotypical arrest.
Not every arrest is stereotypical, by the way, can I just point out. If you're cooperative with the guards, they don't handcuffs on them. Anyway,
you're only handcuffed if there's a risk to the guards.
Do me a favour, both of you. Maliki and Darren, please stay there. I got to go to a break. You can free up line 3 if you wanted there, Jane. The number's 087 188 0008. That's 087 188 0008. I want to know, should we legalise cannabis? Darren was arrested, although he said first he wasn't. But he was, and he was charged, and he was brought to court. He would have had to plead guilty, obviously, eventually. And he got a fine. And the fine was put money in the poor box, 300 quid rather than having a criminal charge.
Real people, real opinions, real talk radio. The multi-award winning Niall Boylan Show.